Hello students, I am Sam sir, and today we are going to see the fourth chapter of your textbook of geography. Just chapter number 4 in geography is called as agriculture. Now in this video we are going to talk about these topics, the types of farming, the cropping patterns, the major crops, the food crops other than grains, and then non-food crops, then the technological and institutional reforms to develop the agriculture in India and agriculture and national economy, concept of food security and globalization vis-a-vis agriculture in India. Now, if you look at this diagram, it shows that agriculture uh, takes 53% of the working population in India. Now, remember that your textbook says it is two-thirds, that is about 65% or 66%, but the figures at present is around 53% or 54%. Now, when we talk about farmers, in agriculture, we are essentially talking about the farming, the farmers, and the production of crops and the problems associated with it. And when we talk about farmers, we have marginal farmers which have less than 1 hectare land, and the ones which have more than that, and a certain maximum limit is kept for them. If their output is more within that limit, they are known as small farmers. And then the farmers which are larger than that are known as large farmers. And there are farmers which do not own any land. They are known as the landless farmers. Now, if you subtract this 7% of the large farmers, we are left with 93%. Now, just imagine that there's a population of 136 crore plus people to feed, and 93% of the farmers are either small or landless or marginal. Now, this is a big challenge in front of them, in front of the country, because food security is required. Because food is something without which we cannot do at all. Now, the crops of India can be broadly classified into two types. We have the food crops and the cash crops. In food crops, we have the cereals, the pulses, and the spices. In cash crops, we have the oil seeds, fibers, and plantation, and whatever is not coming under this category are known as the other crops. There are three types of farming practiced in India. One is known as primitive subsistence farming, other is intensive subsistence farming, and the third one is commercial farming, and plantation is also type of commercial farming. Now, the word subsistence means to survive with the bare minimum. So, when we're talking about primitive subsistence farming, this is a type of farming done for survival, only for the survival, and this is done on small scale. This is done on small patches of land with primitive tools, and so the production is very low. This type of farming depends on monsoon for irrigation, and it depends on the natural fertility of the soil, and the environment should be suitable for those particular crops. And slash and burn is a method used for clearing patches for cropping. This is also known as zooming in the northeastern states of India, and your textbook tells us about the different names of this same technique practiced in different parts of the world. In slash and burn, land is cleared by slashing the trees and burning them. So this figure clearly shows what it is. They have really slashed and really burnt this area. Now, this is not sustainable for the environment, but this is required for agriculture. Now, I want to tell you one more thing about the slash and burn technique, that these areas are used as long as the soil is fertile, and when the soil loses its fertility or productivity, some other areas cleared by the same method and cultivation is done there. In intensive subsistence farming, this is also for subsistence, but this is practiced on high population pressure areas such as the metros and the larger cities, and it is very labor intensive, and because it is, you have to take out maximum uh, production from a small piece of land several times in a cropping season, for example, or all throughout the year you're cropping, planting something and then harvesting it again and again. So a lot of fertilizer is required for this, and a lot of irrigation is also used. Now production is higher in this type of farming than the primitive subsistence farming, and this actually puts a lot of pressure on the agricultural land. I'll show you some photographs, and this reduce, if the size of farming land is reduced, then this type of farming becomes uneconomical. Now this is a photograph from Mumbai, and that's a local train there, Central Line. And if you can see the way the farming is done, it's for vegetables, not for food grains. And the land is so much near the railway track, and also look at the quality of water they are using for irrigation. It's just like a drain water, and polluted, and you have this pipe, this tube which is going to the nala and bringing water from there and taking it to the field. So this type of farming is trying to maximize what from whatever land resources is available. Now this is one more example. Here the land available is even smaller, but still you just see the source of water is a gutter. This type of farming is very common in the suburbs of Mumbai, and it's required because there is no alternative to that. Some vegetables come from neighboring towns such as Nasik and Pune, but most of it is grown in Mumbai itself, and the only land available is on the railway tracks. Now, when we come to commercial farming, it is done on a larger scale. It's done like a business, and it's done with modern equipment and modern tools, modern methods. Now, this farming that is commercial farming is done for marketing. The main purpose is marketing, selling your products. Now, because of that, the aim is to produce maximum yield in minimum time and on smallest area of land. For this, high yielding variety or high yield variety of seeds are used. Even when this variety of seeds are used, you still require a lot of fertilizers and insecticides and pesticides. And the degree of commercialization varies from place to place. For example, rice is a commercial crop in Haryana and Punjab, but it is a crop of subsistence in Odisha. As you already know by now, that plantation is also a type of commercial farming. It is a farming of a single crop on a large area, and it is an intersection between agriculture and industry. That the reason is the produce obtained from plantation is often used as raw material in industries. For example, rubber obtained from rubber trees, the sap is sold to tire industries, and sugar cane is sold to sugar industries. Now, for plantation, large expanses of land are used, and it is very capital intensive, and often you find migrant laborers working there. Now, the plantation area is well connected by transportation and communication facilities, so that the agricultural produce can be taken to the factories easily. Examples of this kind of plantation are tea, coffee, rubber, sugarcane, etc. Always good to look at a tea plantation. Now, India has got three distinct cropping seasons. They are known as the Rabi season, which is in winter. We have the Kharif season in monsoon, and between the two, we have a small season known as Zaid, that is during the summer time. Now, Rabi season of winter in this, the crops are grown in October and December and harvested in April or between April and June. I want to tell you one thing. When we are talking about agriculture, we are not just talking about the farm and the seeds and the crops. It includes everything from preparing the soil, uh, planting the seeds, irrigation, giving proper condition for the plants to grow till the seeds are the crop is produced, and then harvesting, storage, and marketing. It's a cycle from input till output, from input of efforts and labor and seed till the output of money landing in your hand. That is a whole cycle. That is agriculture. Now, crops depend on atmospheric moisture. Now, rabi crops are grown in winter. Now, this moisture I'm talking about it is not rain. It's not rainfall because fog area in the north of India, if you are aware of that, is also equivalent to low level clouds, and they also contain moisture, and that is the moisture that is required for rabi crops. Now, Green Revolution has uh, enabled Haryana, Punjab, and West UP and parts of Rajasthan to not entirely depend on the atmospheric moisture. And the precipitation in winter is especially useful for Rabi season crops because, especially at the time of uh, uh, ripening of the crops. Now, these western temperate cyclones originate on the Mediterranean Sea because of high pressure there, and they move towards India, towards the Indian Peninsula because we have a low pressure here comparatively, and this causes some rains in the winter season, and that's especially beneficial for Rabi crops. The example of Rabi crops are pea, wheat, barley, gram, and mustard, and it's mostly practiced in north and northwestern states. The Kharif season arrives at the arrival of monsoon, and the harvesting is done in September, October. And these crops need a lot of water because they are the type of crops which are depending on rain. Now, the main crops are paddy, that is rice, maize, jowar, bajra, tur dal, that is also known as arhar dal, moong dal, urad dal, cotton, jute, groundnut, and soybean. And the main areas where Kharif crops are planted are Assam, West Bengal, Telangana, Tamil Nadu, Kerala, Maharashtra, and the Konkan coast, Uttar Pradesh, and Bihar. And there are three crops of rice in Assam, West Bengal, and Odisha. They are known as Aus, Aman, and Bodo. The Zaid season comes in summer. This is a short season between Rabi and Kharif, and some Zaid crops. You are aware of the fruits that you get in the summertime, such as watermelon, muskmelon, then some vegetables, and also some fodder. Now, the major crops in India are rice, wheat, millets, in that order, pulses, tea, coffee, sugarcane, oilseeds, cotton, and jute. Out of this, cotton and jute are fibers. Now, rice is a staple food for majority of Indians, and India is the second largest producer of rice after China. And rice is a kharif crop requiring warm temperatures, high humidity, and good rainfall. And this can be also grown in low rainfall areas with sufficient irrigation. Now, this map of India is not accurate when it shows Jammu and Kashmir region, but you can see this greenery on the right hand side. They represent the rice crop areas. The right half of India, the right half of India is, sorry about that. The right half of India is tilted towards the Bay of Bengal, and that provides a good drainage and good fertile soil in that direction. We can also see in the Malabar coast, the western coast, This is also a good rice producing area. This is because of low lying area. The coastal plain is low lying. Wheat is the next most important cereal crop in India. It's a rabi crop requiring cool growing season with bright sunshine during ripening especially, and some 50 to 75 centimeter rainfall equally distributed all over the entire year. That's good enough for it. And the Ganga Satluj plains and the northwest and some regions of the black soil Deccan region is suitable for production of wheat. Major producers are Haryana, Punjab, Madhya Pradesh, Uttar Pradesh, Bihar, and Rajasthan. These are the wheat producing states of India. Millets include jowar, bajra, and ragi. Now, millets are coarse grains, but still they are high in nutritional value. For example, ragi is rich in iron, calcium, and many other micronutrients. Also, roughage. So it's a good idea to take ragi porridge, especially for girls. Now, jawar is the third most important food crop in India, and it is grown uh, in rainy season. Sorry, it's a rain-fed crop, but hardly needs irrigation. That soil moisture is good enough for it, and it's grown in Maharashtra, Karnataka, Andhra Pradesh, and Madhya Pradesh. We have the other two millets here, bajra and ragi. They grow well on sandy soil and shallow black soil. Rajasthan, UP, Maharashtra, Gujarat, and Haryana are growing regions for bajra, and ragi grows well in dry regions and on red soil, black soil, sandy, loamy, and shallow black soils. And Karnataka, Tamil Nadu, Himachal Pradesh, Uttarakhand, Sikkim, Jharkhand, and Arunachal Pradesh, they all grow ragi. Now, maize is a crop which can be used both as a food and fodder for animals, food for human beings and fodder for animals, and it's a kharif crop. In Bihar, it can also be grown in Rabi season. Now, this requires a temperature, warm temperature between 21 and 27 degrees Celsius, and it grows well on old alluvial soil. Now, high yielding variety seeds are available and fertilizers are available in plenty. Irrigation has helped the production of this crop. And Karnataka, UP, Bihar, Andhra Pradesh, Telangana, and Madhya Pradesh are the major producers. We're talking about pulses. When you talk about pulses, you remember dals. We have the tur or arhar dal, the yellow colored one, urad dal required for idli and dosa. We have the moong, that is the orange colored one. The green colored one. Masoor is orange colored one. Peas and gram. Now, India is the second largest producer and consumer of pulses. This is good because of the vegetarianism very popular in our country, because these dals, these pulses provide good source of protein to the vegetarian diet. The pulses don't require much moisture and they can very well survive dry conditions. Now, there's something important. They are legumes, they are leguminous. So they restore soil fertility, except arhar. Arhar is a leguminous plant, but still it doesn't help in restoring soil fertility. That's why it's put in a bracket here. Now, they are grown in rotation with other crops because they enhance the soil fertility. Now, how do they do it? Let's see in the next slide. MP, UP, Rajasthan, Maharashtra, and Karnataka are the major producers. Now, here's the reason. Look at this root on the right hand side. Uh, these are root nodules. The junction of root hairs, and there are nodules. And if you were to break a nodule and take out the extract and stain it and observe it under a microscope, it will appear like on the left hand side. It's now this bacteria. It's a bacteria. This bacteria is known as rhizobium, and these rhizobium bacteria are responsible for uh, holding on to the atmospheric nitrogen, converting it into soluble nitrate form, and providing it to the plant. Now, because nitrates are good fertilizer, nitrogen is a good fertilizer. This is the reason why these leguminous plants are grown as during crop rotation. Now let's look at food crops, but which are not grains. We have sugarcane, we have coffee, and we have tea. We have more. Sugarcane is India is the second largest producer of sugarcane in the world after Brazil, and this crop grows well in tropical as well as subtropical climate. It requires a warm, humid climate mainly, and irrigation is required if the rainfall is less, and it's labor intensive. This is also a plantation crop, remember, and it tolerates a variety of soils, and it's a good source of. This is the thing which is used for manufacturing sugar. Other sweet things are also used for manufacturing sugar, but in India, this is mainly used for manufacturing sugar. Gur is same as jaggery, and khansari is unrefined sugar, which is little bit off color, little bit yellowish or brownish in color, and reportedly having better nutritional value than just the white sugar. And molasses is a blackish, dark, thick, viscous liquid, sweet liquid. And given below are the states producing a lot of sugar cane. Then let's look at the oil seeds. Now, oil seeds, when you press them between two sheets of paper, they leave an oily spot because they contain oils. Here are the popular ones. Here we have the soybean on the left. You have the groundnut on the right. Then you have the rapeseed, and mustard is similar to rapeseed, but they both are different. Rapeseed is equivalent to sarso in Hindi, and mustard is equivalent to rai. And on the center you have the sunflower seed, reportedly good for the heart. And on the right hand side you have the sesame or the til. It's available in black color also. Some more oil seeds. On the left is cotton, again good for heart and for health. On the right you have the linseed or the flax, again good for heart. You have the coconut, although this is not like a seed like the other seeds, but still it's important oil producing crop, plantation crop. Then we have the castor seeds have importance in medicine, in manufacturing of soap, and in industry. India is the second largest producer of groundnut after China, and groundnut is a kharif crop. And of the all oil seeds produced, it takes 50% of uh, the share of all the seeds collectively produced. India is the third largest producer of rapeseed after Canada and China, and our total cropped area for rapeseed is 12% of the agricultural land in India. Groundnut, mustard, coconut, sesame, soybean, castor seeds, cotton seeds, sunflower seeds, and linseed seeds are some more oil seeds. Most of them produce edible oil. For example, castor doesn't produce an edible oil, but it has got industrial use importance. And linseed and mustard are rabi crops, and sesame is kharif in north, rabi in south, and castor is grown both as rabi and kharif crop. This is a tea plantation in Darjeeling. India is the second largest producer of tea after China, and it's an important beverage crop. And tea requires a tropical and subtropical climate, deep and fertile, well-drained soil which is rich in humus and organic matter, and it requires a climate which is moist and warm, frost-free all throughout the year. Frequent and evenly distributed showers help. This is a labor-intensive crop and often processed within the tea gardens itself to preserve the freshness. And given below are the tea producing states in India. This is a coffee plantation, and these fruits are known as coffee pods. India produces about 3.5% of the world's coffee, and the variety of coffee we grow in India is known as Arabica because of the great demand in India as well as abroad. And this coffee was initially introduced on the Baba Budan Hills, which is in Chikmagalur district in Karnataka, and now grows well on in the Nilgiris, Kerala, and Tamil Nadu. There are some crops known as horticulture crops, and India is the second largest producer of fruits and vegetables in the world after China, just like we are second in population in the world after China. Similarly, we are second largest producer of fruits and vegetables in China in the world. And India produces about 13% of the world's vegetables. India is an important producer of peas, cauliflower, onion, cabbage, tomato, brinjal, and potato, and so many other vegetables that you know of. And India is a producer of tropical fruits as well as temperate fruits because of its geographic location. We have 78 varieties of mangoes in India, and internationally there are some 500 varieties of mangoes. So you can say that 20% of them grow in India. Nagpur as well as Cherrapunji is famous for oranges. Now, when you if you're living up country like in the north, you have only one or two variety of bananas in the market. But if you go to Maharashtra towards Bhusawal area, it's an area with good plantation of bananas. If you go to the coastal areas of Maharashtra, for example Mumbai, you get 3 4 varieties of bananas. When you go down further south, this is the scene you'll commonly encounter on the roadside side shops. This is a roadside shop from Kerala, and you can count 8 or 9 varieties of bananas here. Lychee is produced majorly in Uttar Pradesh and Bihar. Pineapples in Meghalaya, some in Andhra Pradesh. Grapes, Andhra, Telangana, and Maharashtra. You have apples, most famously Jammu and Kashmir and Himachal Pradesh. You have apricots, again the same states. Walnut, the same states. Then we come to the crops which are not for food. For example, rubber. Now, rubber is an equatorial crop and grows well in tropical and subtropical area wherever there is moist and humid climate, good rainfall and warm temperature, and it's an important raw material for industries, especially for the tire industries. And India is the fourth largest producer of natural rubber, and the states given below have the climate suitable for growing rubber. This is how the tapping is done. The sap drips drop by drop in that container, and that container it is emptied from time to time. The fiber crops are mainly cotton on the left. You have jute that is green in color here with lot of water required, and you have hemp. Also in your textbook is mentioned silk, but that's an animal fiber, although mulberry production comes as part of horticulture. Cotton is one of the main raw materials of the cotton textile industry, and India is the second largest producer of cotton after China. And cotton grows well in dry parts of Deccan, and but essentially yeah, on black soil. So black soil got the name of black cotton soil also. This crop requires high temperature, light rainfall, and bright sunshine, frost-free days. It's a kharif crop and takes 6 to 8 months to mature. Jute is also known as golden fiber for its color and also because it's very economical and of good quality, although it's not waterproof, and that gives it a minus mark there, and it loses to nylon because of its qualities. And nylon, because of its mass produced, often beats jute in prices. Jute grows well on well-drained fertile soils in floodplains where the soil are renewed every year, requires high temperature, lot of rainfall, and used for making gunny bags, mats, and ropes, carpets. Now we are going to see some reform policies. Now, wherever India is struggling because of its agriculture and the farmers are not happy, we'll see the reason and we'll talk about possible solutions. Now, after India got its independence, we already had a lot of problems which we got, uh, even though we did not want them, but we had to do something because otherwise our country would lag behind. So, first of the things we did, these are institutional uh, reforms. Now, the first one is to consolidate the holdings. This means converting many small and fragmented holdings into one big farm. Now, I want to tell you one thing. Suppose you want to buy a packet of biscuit, you can go and buy it for 5 rupees. Now, suppose you say, no, I don't want to buy it for 5 rupees. I'll manufacture it myself in my house and save money. Okay, fine, you go ahead. But if you do that, you spend more than 5 rupees. And outside, when you buy, if you the wrapper itself will cost you more than 5 rupees to print. So what I mean to say is if you're doing farming on a large piece of land, it becomes more economically feasible, more economical. Process in which farmers fragmented land holdings are pooled and then reallotted them in a way that each gets a single farm of having some same total size and fertility, that is known as consolidation of holdings. This concept came from Russia and perhaps you learnt about that in history. Now, the second thing is known as collectivization. This is a policy of forced consolidation of individual peasant holder households into collective farms. This again is a Russian concept. Probably you learnt in history. Now it says forced consolidation, and in the top we read about fragmentation. Now, fragmentation is because of in India we have this right to inheritance. The father distributes his properties between his sons, and each one gets a small piece of land, and then on farming on that land becomes uh, uneconomical. Then when we say cooperation, we are talking about the cooperative societies related to farming and agriculture. Now, each farmer need not own all the equipment. He can always share, and if that can be done, he can share the costs and the maintenance costs and pay some fees and uh, get his work done. That is known as cooperation. Then we had a system of zamindari during the British rule, where the zamindar used to collect land revenue and give it to the um, rulers, the British rulers. And this zamindar used to be like a independent small ruler of his own area. So when India became independent, this system got abolished. Now, land reform was the main focus of the first 5 year plan because uh, we had to develop our own country, our economy. Now, let's read about technological and institutional reforms in order to develop agriculture in India. Now, first is sustainable use of land without proper technology and institutional changes slowed down the development of agriculture because still we were depending on the old methods. We were taking things for granted. We were not thinking about the future. We were not thinking that one day we will have a population of 136 crore people. And we were looking at the way farming was done and we were continuing that. That was all right for those days, but it's not all right for now because everybody needs money and the population has increased so many times. And farmers of those days used to depend on natural fertility of the soil and upon monsoon. And this made it necessary to bring in reforms so that food production does not become a problem or in the years to come. Now, I already told you about the problem of fragmentation of land holdings. Now we saw two revolutions. One is known as Green Revolution. This was introduced in 1960, and this is what mainly concerns our topic. We have the White Revolution also, but that's mostly concerned with production of milk. So let's not talk about that now. In Green Revolution, the concept of high yielding variety seeds was introduced. These plants do not grow much in height, but they produce more yield. The crop, like that, we're talking in tons or millions of tons, is more. Now, these still require chemical fertilizer and pesticides, and earlier our farmers were using the traditional fertilizers, the manure and so on. But the chemical fertilizers were introduced. Some companies like Kripko and IFCO came up, and many thousands of pesticide manufacturers came up after 1960s. Now these efforts had a limitation. Now for every law that is made, a land reform law, if it is made, it has to be implemented properly. Now these efforts led only to the concentration of development only in a few selected areas. So there was a need felt for a better reform. So in the 1980s and 1990s, a more comprehensive land development reform was initiated, and this included institutional reforms which were done earlier, and to that technological reforms were also added. Now technological institutional reforms, some of them are like this. The farmer always worries what will happen to his crops if there's a disease or there's a drought of blood or cyclone or fire. So the concept of crop insurance was started. Then cooperative societies and banks were started so that the farmers could get loan at lower interest rates. The problem with Indian farmer is because of their poverty, they often take loans for agriculture and spend it on non-agricultural use, and then they land up in problem once again, and then they commit suicide and whatnot. Now, introduction of credit card system for the farmers for their agricultural needs. This was introduced. This was known as Kisan Credit Card or KCC. Then, and accident insurance scheme was also introduced for them, known as Personal Accident Insurance Scheme or PAIS. Regular special weather bulletins were made for them on TV, on radio, and also informative programs about agriculture by different agricultural universities such as PUSA. In Maharashtra, I think some of them, some of you are familiar with programs such as Amchi Mati, Amchi Mansa. Now, announcing a minimum support price. This is a price which the government says that if you are not able to sell your crop elsewhere, you come to us and we will buy your crops at least this much price. That is a guaranteed minimum price is there, and this is a measure taken by the government so that the farmers are not cheated by the middlemen. We have plenty of middlemen in India for everything and for farming produce especially. Now let's see about agriculture and the national economy. Now you know that more than 52% of the total workforce are employed in the farming area. That is the reason why agriculture is considered as the backbone of Indian economy, and still our GDP share, its share in GDP has decreased. Now if this were to continue, this will affect the other spheres of economy also, and that indirectly or directly will affect you and I, the entire society. Because of this, government has taken certain measures. Now they have established ICAR or Indian Council of Agricultural Research, and they have so many research bodies for weed science, for soil science. They have it for agricultural engineering and so on. Then we have agricultural universities. We have veterinary colleges and veterinary universities. We have horticultural development boards. We have research and development bodies for meteorology and weather forecasting also, because weather and climate play an important role in agriculture. Most importantly, if the rural infrastructure is developed, and that adds a lot of value to our agriculture. Now let us see why, the reason why agriculture is not generating enough employment opportunities, even though the GDP rate is increasing. The reasons are, there is competition from the international market, and our products in international market are not cost effective, because our the subsidies which the developed countries provide are more, and so their products are cheaper. And then reduction in public investment. The public investment, if it is there, and and the manufacturing company especially, and fertilizer, etc., if it is there, then the cost uh, uh, load on the farmer will reduce. Now, subsidy is like a discount, or it's like a concession. So, if subsidy has decreased on fertilizer, this naturally means the cost of fertilizers has increased, and that actually means the cost of production has increased. So, the farmer has to spend more money out of his pocket, and that's a negative point for us. Then reduction in import duties is detrimental, because import duties are supposed to protect the Indian market. But if we reduce our duties, then we have lot of material coming from outside the country, outside India, to be sold in Indian markets, and these products will compete with our own products. Then, because farming is no longer attractive nowadays, it's almost a insult to call somebody a farmer. Some people consider that it that way. Farmers are withdrawing their investment from agriculture; they're investing it elsewhere. Let's talk about food security. Security, what it actually means. This is a condition of the society in which all people at all times, remember this, not sometimes, it's always, have physical, social, and economical access to sufficient food, safe food, nutritious food that meets their own food preferences and dietary needs for an active and healthy life. Remember this definition, it's important for exam. Now, number of people in many regions of our country do not get food security. The reasons are like poverty, they have the food available but they cannot buy it. Remoteness of place, some places are just uh, located very remotely. Then some places are prone to natural disasters. The coastal plains of the East India, for example, Andhra Pradesh and Odisha, if there are floods again and again, if there are cyclones again and again, that causes problem in this area. Then there's uncertainty of food supply. Some areas, remote areas, sometimes they get the food, sometimes they don't. Now, what does the government do about it? Firstly, is to maintain a buffer stock. Sufficient stock is maintained in Food Corporation of India godowns. You'll find them in every town and every city in India, especially near the railway lines and near the highways. And they are responsible for procuring food grains at the minimum support price announced by the government, and they maintain stocks. But they maintain mainly wheat and rice, because these two are the staple diet crops in India, and they stock food grains. They're responsible for this. That is half the story. The other half is distributing it to the people. That is done by the public distribution system, or PDS. Now, the public distribution system, sometimes we call it as rationing system. This ensures the distribution of food grains and essential commodities at subsidized prices, that is discounted prices to people below poverty line. That is known as BPL. We will talk about BPL after a couple of slides once again. Now there are challenges to this. The subsidies provided on fertilizers, power, and water have now reached unsustainable levels. If you just keep on giving discounts and discounts and discounts and discounts, somewhere there's an input cost. There's cost for manufacturing also, for producing fertilizers, for producing power, for procuring water, and now this has become unsustainable. Then there's a tendency to use excessive and imprudent use of fertilizers and water. This has led to waterlogging, salinity, and depletion of essential micronutrients in the soil. Now we compare, for many people, their crops are like their babies, and we compare the plants with human beings, and we feel that if we give them more to eat or we give them more fertilizers, just like a baby becomes fat and round and plumpy and healthy, our plants will also do that. But it doesn't work with plants like that. They will take only the nutrients required for them in that same quantity as required, and the rest will remain in the soil. Essentially, all the fertilizers are water soluble because only such nutrients can be taken up by the plants. So what happens to these fertilizers is they remain in the soil, they get dissolved in the water given for irrigation, which also we over provide. And after dissolving, these fertilizers enter the soil, go to the groundwater table, and when it rises from there, it brings in salt from the lower strata of the earth, and this salt will cause the soil to become saline, and lot of depletion of micronutrients of the soil take place. According to one research taken up by National Geographic Society, Indian farmers use 51% more fertilizer than required. That is, yes, 51%. That means if 100 kilos would have worked, we put 151 kilos, hoping that this 51 kilos extra will give us 51% more crop. But it doesn't work like that. That's only a wastage of money and spoiling our own ground, our own soil. Now, high minimum support price has distorted the cropping pattern. For example, wheat and paddy are grown more in Punjab and Haryana because they fetch more money. Now, again, like I told you, we'll talk about APL and BPL. BPL stands for below poverty line, and APL stands for above poverty line. According to the government strategies, if you are living in a rural area and if you earn less than 26 rupees per day, you are below the poverty line. If you are living in an urban area and if you are earning less than 33 rupees 70 paisa per day, you are below poverty line. But if you are earning more than 26 rupees or 37 rupees, 33 rupees in rural and urban area respectively, you are called as above poverty line. This is a controversial issue. This is a controversial categorization, and this categorization is not perfect, and many deserving poor are excluded because if you are earning 40 rupees, you are fitting in the category of above poverty line. Not tell me what will 40 rupees buy for you. And many farmers which are in APL, that is above poverty line, they slip to BPL because of so many reasons. For example, if there's a crop failure, and then our government, our system do not have any facility to shift these people from APL to BPL. So how are these people going to benefit from the government schemes? Now here are some remedies. We talked about problem long enough. Now, if each district and each developmental block in the country can be made self-sufficient in food grain production, Now, if this is to be done, this has to be done uh, by the help of the government providing proper infrastructure, credit linkages, and with the use of latest technologies. And we have to develop proper infrastructure for irrigation, electricity, and if we have that, we may find some private investment also, and that will make our agriculture more economically feasible. Each area in the country will have some or other food crops with better potential growth. Now, if these are developed, rather than just talking about rice and wheat, these other crops should also be given equal importance. The focus on increasing food grain production should be on a sustainable basis. Free trade in grains can create employment and reduce rural poverty, true for the rural areas. And the government should formulate policies which can make Indian agricultural produce competitive with international market. Now, this has got to do with the shipping charges, the duties to be paid, and so on. Then, if we practice again the organic farming, see, once upon a time, the green revolution was considered to be the ultimate thing, but whatever measures they suggested those days, for example, chemical fertilizers and pesticides and insecticides, and the methods of irrigation also. Today, we are talking about those things being bad, being detrimental to the environment and to the soil, to agriculture itself, not to mention the farmers. Now, if we cultivate oil seeds, fruits and vegetables and industrial crops, is this important? But we should not neglect the food crops. That means the farmers should not leave producing food crops and go after producing this other crops which is mentioned here in the first sentence. And also, agricultural land should not be put to non-agricultural use. Agricultural land itself is reducing in a percentage in India because we need urbanization, we need industrialization, and so on and so forth. But all those developments should not be at the cost of agriculture. Then use of pesticides and fertilizers and insecticides should be done as a last resort, and to the minimum, not to 51% extra. That's not at all good. Water management should be made more efficient. More efforts are needed to improve the condition of the marginal and small farmers and also the landless farmers. And gene revolution is needed. All right, we had the green revolution, now we need the gene revolution. This includes genetic engineering for developing seeds which are resistant to drought, for example. We need diversification in cropping pattern from cereals to high value crops in area where this is possible and without affecting the food crops. The growing of crops needs less irrigation. For example, there are some medicinal plants, some fruits, some crops for biodiesel. For example, jatropha and jojoba. Some flowers also. These should be also grown. Now, if we use our water resources imprudently, this will lead to waterlogging. First of all, the soil becoming saline next, then the cultivation of water intensive crops. They use a lot of groundwater. This reduces the water level in the aquifers. That is the reason why tube wells and wells run dry. And because larger farmers can dig deeper and or they can bring water from pipes, but the poor farmer, the marginal and the small farmers, the landless ones, they just stop cultivating and they move to the cities. They become a daily wage laborer there. That way, they at least they can survive with their families. Now, the small farmers are always at the receiving end of everything. They are receiving at the receiving end the water supply shortage, They don't have adequate storage facilities and marketing facilities. Of course, there is uncertainty in monsoon rains, so there is uncertainty in production. There is uncertainty of the market. They always live a high pressure life. They pay prices, high high lot of money for a good variety of seeds, fertilizers. At the same time, they lack the bargaining power to fix prices in their favor. They cannot say that I will sell my material for only this much, not less than this. On the other hand, because lot of agricultural produce reaches the agricultural mandi at the same time, there is a distress selling. Suppose I am not able to sell my crop, then what is the use of all that effort? So the people start selling in distress at a lower price, and this is a problem with the demand and supply. If the supply is more than demand, the prices fall. What is the impact of globalization on agriculture? Now, globalization means opening up the world market for both buying and selling. Now, this poses a challenge also and an opportunity also. It is an opportunity if our prices are competitive, if our products are good enough. But otherwise, it's a challenge because the other products will land up in our country and eat up our market. Now, the problem is our subsidies are not as good as those given by the developed countries, and that is the reason our products are, although if the quality is good, still our products are not competitively priced. So our products do not stand a chance in the international market. This is the end of the chapter. This is a seed known as Jatropha. This produces an oil, and the best thing about this oil is this can be crushed directly. The oil can be taken out, and without any processing, it can be further used on directly for as a diesel. So this is known as a biodiesel seed. This can be used for directly for the generator sets or the DG sets. If you like this chapter, give it a thumbs up. But it's not essential for you to give a thumbs up. If you feel you have benefited from it, you give it and subscribe to the channel.